Alrighty. Hey everyone, what's going on? My name is Mav, and today we're going to be having a conversation about spiritual skepticism, or I lied, scientific skepticism. And I personally have a lot of experience, I guess, with being skeptical about science. Also, generally, like the idea is like scientific illiteracy. Like a lot of people just don't understand how science works. I am obviously not a scientist, but as a layperson, I have committed a little bit of time to learning more from people who have studied science. And as a result, I feel like I am a little bit better off. I feel like I understand more about how the world works, and I feel more connected to the world, honestly, because I understand more of how I, as a human being, am a part of it. Um, but one of the major issues with scientific skepticism is that when we don't understand how this stuff works, we can be really susceptible to a lot of like scams and conspiracy theories and things that are basically a lot of we are more susceptible to believing misinformation if we're not critical in the way that we think about things. And I think that understanding the scientific method can allow you to be more skeptical and critical of things in life. So I guess I'm kind of making quite a number of assumptions that, like, if you are someone who relies on the scientific method, you might be a little bit more of a critical thinker. That is my personal experience. When I was more skeptical of the scientific method, I didn't really do any critical thinking, but as I learned the scientific method and how that can be a part of critiquing your own beliefs and things like that, and like testing claims, that's pretty helpful in my own personal self-development and the way that I understand the world. I think critical thinking is really useful. And when we understand science and we're willing to kind of trust other people who know more about things than we do, sometimes we can be better off. Obviously, there are like a million caveats. There are a million different examples where people can be really trusting of science and make a lot of really bad decisions. So I'm really not trying to make any specific claims about any person in particular. But I just think that these conversations are useful to have. This is part 2 of the discussion about this topic. Last week, I'm just going to review some of the things we talked about last week. We went over some things such as what happens when people like mistrust the medical system. We looked at parents who neglect their children and don't get them medical treatment for religious reasons, or maybe they believe that Jesus will heal their child or something, and so they don't get medical treatment for their child, and they end up dying or having some type of irreversible damage of some kind. I know for a fact, and I wish I had more information on this offhand, but I know there's a young woman who is, I think, suing her parents because they didn't get her medical treatment, and now she has I think she's blind or has some type of like permanent impairment because of her parents' neglect to get her taken care of. And then we also talked about mental health and how when people neglect their mental health and don't really trust what science has, I guess, discovered about how the brain works, and they just kind of believe that mental health comes from like demons or something like that, how that can also be problematic. But yeah, so today we're going to kind of continue that discussion and talk a little bit about scam and conspiracy theories and how scientific skepticism and scientific illiteracy can make you more susceptible to those things. And then towards the end of the discussion, hopefully we'll get here today, I want to just talk about what science is, talk about what those methods look like. And then at the very end, we will kind of look at an example of a person who I believe does a really good job of being really skeptical of things. Maybe too skeptical, but in a good way. I think he is a good example. But today we're going to get started with this conversation. But before that, I want to make sure that those of you who are new to the channel get a little bit of an introduction. So my name is Mav, and this is Mav Magic, my channel. And here I like to talk about things like mental health, spirituality, what else? Neurodivergence, different things like that. Pretty much whatever is on my mind, gender identity, things like that. So if any of those things interest you, I would really encourage you to subscribe. If you're watching this live, share it with for your friends, or if you're rewatching it, go ahead and share it as well. Go ahead and check the scroll at the bottom of this video. You'll see places where you can find me on social media, and then also a spot for if you'd like to support the channel in any way, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com/mathmagic. That would be really useful. But we're going to just get started with the content today. I have, like I said, like usual, I have quite a bit of notes. I don't have an article for you today, but I'm going to be sharing these thoughts with you kind of off the cuff a little bit. So, all right, so when you forsake the scientific method in critical thinking, you lend yourself to being susceptible to a lot of dangerous ideas and beliefs. This can mean you get stuck in delusional beliefs, or it can have larger consequences like losing a lot of money to an online healer. Learning how to recognize scams in religious and spiritual communities is a vital skill that we should all practice. Okay, so for this conversation, we're going to start with something that really fascinated me when I first found out about it. It is the story of a man named Franz Mesmer. So that word mesmer might sound familiar because it's where the word mesmerized come from. And when someone's mesmerized, you're kind of like hypnotized in awe of another person. And so this guy he really is kind of the first person to really explore the phenomenon of hypnotism. And this video is really, I'm going to show you obviously a video, and this one is really important because when we see how similar this story is with a lot of stuff that's going on in modern spiritual communities, for me, it was pretty shocking how similar it was, and I felt really glad to have heard about Franz Mesmer. And once again, I'm going to shamelessly plug the book, The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. I'm still not finished with the book, but so far it has been really useful and kind of helping me understand how the human brain works, how we can be convinced to believe really fascinating things, things that we don't really have any evidence for. But yeah, so far it's been a really interesting read. I just haven't finished it yet, so I would definitely want to recommend that to you all. But that was one of the places where I heard about the story about Franz Mesmer. So I'm going to share that with you all today. We're going to watch this together. I have a couple of notes, so we're going to stop a couple times through, and then we will learn a little bit more about this guy and how he has really impacted, I would say, the modern spiritual community and religious community as well. Alrighty. Okay.
For the first time, lifted in the air. In 1783, human beings left the ground for the first time, lifted in the air by an invisible gas discovered only a few years earlier.
We're going to speed this up, y'all.
Scientific progress in the 18th century in Europe, a period known as the Age of Enlightenment, seemed like magic. Experience in chemistry and physics were fundamentally altering how humans understood the universe. The world of medicine, on the other hand, was still largely stuck in the past. Painful, often ineffective medical procedures that had persisted for centuries, like leeching and bloodletting, were still in practice. Until a charismatic German physician appeared in Paris in 1778. He claimed to wield magnetic healing powers and that he could cure almost any illness using just his hands. His methods caused a sensation. Even the Queen of France herself, Marie Antoinette, received his treatment. It seems like Anton Mesmer had discovered the key to how disease works in the human body. Or maybe he was. Franz Anton Mesmer studied medicine at the University of Vienna, and he was fascinated by how natural energies in the universe, like gravity, interacted with the human body. He ultimately developed a theory about the fundamental nature of life he called animal magnetism. Basically, Mesmer theorized that all living things are connected by an invisible magnetic fluid.
It's a bit ambiguous whether it's an actual...
Okay, so I wanted to pause here really quick and note that he brought up this thing called animal magnetism. And basically, it is this mysterious fluid or substance that flows through the human body. And you can see here, I guess I'll just let her finish this statement.
Fluid, or more like some sort of force. But essentially, it just pervades the universe.
So basically, it is this kind of substance that pervades the entire universe. It flows through all of our bodies and permeates everything. What does this sound like? Okay. In spiritual communities, you hear a lot of people talking about consciousness, right? We're all made up of consciousness. It's this thing that connects all human beings. It is this substance that's like floaty through the universe or whatever. A lot of times you hear people just say like there is energy that connects all human beings and we can kind of control the flow of energy moving around. And I really want to make it clear that I'm a person who I think it's normal to kind of use those terms to kind of describe the way that we experience senses moving through our body and things like that. And I use the word to talk about emotional energy that moves through my body and things like that. And but I do want to make it clear that sometimes people just like use these terms to actually mean something particular, but they have a really hard time actually saying what it is that they're talking about. It's the same as this animal magnetism stuff. It's like this fluid or substance that like, I guess lives in the human body and like kind of floats around, but there really was no way to measure what this stuff was. And even though there's no way for us to measure what this stuff is, how to understand it, to this day, if you were to go on YouTube, like I did earlier, and you just research animal magnetism, there are a lot of people who are still using that idea to kind of as a framework for their belief system or something like that. So sometimes it really doesn't matter if people like debunk certain concepts. People will just believe them because they want to. And that's fine. If you want to believe things, that really is your prerogative. But I think that we should just make sure that we're all understanding like why we believe what we believe and what our beliefs are and whether or not they have evidence. We should just know that. I think it's helpful. All right, let's continue.
And I'm a PhD student. I'm quite interested in sort of medical history more generally.
According to Mesmer, most diseases were caused by this fluid being blocked somewhere in the body. And the cure for almost anything involved restoring the flow of this fluid by magnetizing the patient.
Hence the medical sort of treatment that he came up with.
Initially, Mesmer had his patients swallow iron filings, which he claimed he could guide through the body using magnets.
Quite quickly, though, he discovered that just using his hands was enough and would produce the same effects.
When he approached the French Academy of Sciences and Royal Society of Medicine to seek approval for his theory, he was turned away repeatedly. So he switched tactics and appealed directly to the people of Paris. And they loved it.
Okay, this part is great to me. So 2 things that I want to mention here. The first thing is that he mentioned that first he would have the people consume metal filings and would use some type of wand, right, to direct the filings through the person's body. Super interesting, by the way, really interesting concept. But he noticed that it really didn't matter whether or not he used the wand. He could use his hand or the wand. I'm sure he could probably have used like a turkey leg or something ridiculous and everything would have worked. So it's kind of like, you know, if everything works, then does nothing work? Then you know, if you had a headache and it went away, if you like did 10 jumping jacks or like looked at a piece of like chocolate, right? Like, did either of those things actually fix your headache? Probably not. It probably just got better with time, or you know what I'm saying. And the other thing is, so the fact that this guy goes to the scientific, you know, fields and they're like, yeah, this is a joke. We're definitely not going to listen to you. We're definitely not going to even give this, you know, a second thought. So he's like, fine, I'm just going to go straight to the people. So this happens all the time. There are a lot of other examples of more modern individuals who do very similar things. They have ideas and they try to get them, proven by like scientific communities. And oftentimes, there really isn't a way to test these things. So they'll just go straight to the public and then make these claims, and then people will, fall in love with it, and they can get really, really wealthy from doing these things. Yeah, and then at the same time, people can really be helped by these phony products. And that's kind of like the dilemma here. It's like a lot of times, and we'll hear a little bit more about this, but people were actually benefiting from these treatments that this guy was giving. And so, we might have to consider, like, by the end of this video, we'll have a lot to talk about in terms of like what we should be considering from the evidence that we're finding with I guess the techniques that this guy was using. All right, so we'll continue now.
Mesmer's patients, many of them women, came to him with a range of ailments, both physical and psychological, like melancholia, what's now called depression.
His practice was definitely stupendously popular among the French nobility and the upper classes. He would be invited to court quite a lot, and that was another way that his popularity sort of grew at the time.
As Mesmer's reputation spread, he found ways to expand his practice.
So he not only trained disciples, but also started having group seances.
Mesmer invented his baquet, a wooden tub that could magnetize groups of people simultaneously. It was filled with what Mesmer claimed was magnetized water, along with other materials like glass bottles and pieces of metal.
And they would have protruding rods that the patient would press against the affected body part.
Or tether the ailing body part to the baquet with rope, like this man who's suffering from a headache is doing.
Having in mind the alternatives that were on offer at the time, taking part in Mesmer's seances was just a great way to spend your time, in addition to kind of trying to heal whatever it is that your complaint is.
People cry.
So I really want to mention here that the alternative to doing this, like sticking a piece of metal to your head or to wherever like on your body hurts, the alternative was to go to the doctor and get bloodletting done or have like leeches all over you. I don't know about you, if I was the people of France, I'd be like, yeah, please sign me up for the metal rod to my head. Because it seems a lot better. It's obviously a lot less invasive, a lot less threatening. In theory, these treatments are going to be a lot quicker. Probably, I don't really know, obviously, how much things cost back then, but I know right now, if you were to go to some type of a Reiki healer for like 3 treatments for $100 each, that's $300, But if you're going to go to a bunch of specialists and you don't have insurance, you could be spending thousands of dollars, right, on your health. So going to some type of alternative health treatment sounds really great. If a person can help me for a lot less money, I'm going to go see that person rather than spend a whole bunch of money or doing really invasive treatments. I think that this is also a reason why people are really scared of things like chemotherapy. Because these things can be damaging to your body. While they do help with your cancer, they can also be, cause a lot of issues and things like that. And so people avoid getting those intensive treatments. Personally, right? I have an issue with my foot, right? And the one way that I can get it fixed is to get surgery on my foot. But I would like lose feeling in my foot. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that, I'd rather work on some other like more physical mobility things and kind of like deal with it. I'd rather even go do like some other alternative treatment rather than get an invasive surgery on my foot or something like that. So it makes sense, right? It makes sense for the people. They don't know a lot of things. They might be naive, right? They don't understand, what is actually going on, but they're noticing that they're being helped. So yeah, a lot of people are going to fall for these things because they know that it helps, right? So let's give these things a try anyway. All right, let's move on.
Crowded in a dimly lit room while someone nearby played soft music on the glass harmonica.
And then Mesmer would be wandering around in his lilac coat, touching them various places, lower abdomen, thighs, which is where the stoppages seem to be located, especially in the women patients.
People responded to magnetization by experiencing what Mesmer called a crisis.
You'd expect crying, shouting, convulsing, hiccups, laughter. Some of the cases that are described involve people biting their hand such that a mark is left. It would be fairly extreme reactions.
One of these group seances is reimagined.
So this is okay. Let's watch this
1994 biographical film Mesmer, which stars Alan Rickman as the enchanting physician himself.
You see before you the conductors of my power. Muscle fluid is flowing.
But not everyone loved
Okay.
what Mesmer was doing.
All right. So did you see those intense reactions that they gave? Okay, so this is exactly what it's like for people to do this stuff. And yeah, this is what it's like for people to do this stuff, right? They will go through these really intense reactions, right? It's kind of very similar to what happens when people will do things like they'll catch the spirit. They'll have like some type of like Holy Spirit reaction. It's also really similar to during breath work exercises, right? If you do really intense breath work, especially like in a group or something like that, you can have really intense releases. Also very similar to exorcisms, right? You have a person in the center who gets like extremely like riled up in the spirit and has convulsions and stuff like that, and will go through that intense like release, emotional release, which looks pretty dramatic, just very similar to what we saw in those videos. A lot of the convulsing, shaking, really dramatic event. Those things are really, really helpful, by the way, for us to go through as humans. Those are really healing experiences. That type of intensity is really good for us. I wish that I had like a video to show, but like if you watch any nature documentaries and you see like a deer or something like that getting chased, oftentimes if they do end up getting away, they'll like shake their body really vigorously in order to kind of like, I think what I've heard it does in terms of like research is that it kind of like resets the nervous system and helps kind of process the trauma. And so when humans are able to go through that like kind of shaking as well, it can also do things in terms of helping to heal trauma. So when people have these really intense experiences and go through all that shaking and stuff, the intense amount of like pleasurable chemicals that are released in your body can do really tremendous things for you. And you can really notice dramatic increases in your health after an event like this. And I hear real quick, sup over there to Porter. How's it going? Not sure if you're still here, but wanted to say hello. Thanks for stopping in. All right, we're gonna move on here. Okay.
He had already been chased out of Vienna in 1777 after being labeled a fraud and a charlatan for falsely claiming to have cured a young girl of her blindness. And he was starting to get the wrong kind of attention in Paris too, namely within the scientific community.
The conventional sort of doctors were definitely losing a lot of their patients. You also had people actually concerned with the fact that, this magnetic fluid was probably not a thing.
One of those people was the King of France himself, Louis XVI, who in 1784 commissioned a group of leading scientists to investigate Mesmer's methods. The commission was headed up by the first US ambassador to France, Benjamin Franklin, a celebrity scientist himself who had already mastered a different form of energy, electricity. Those crises Mesmer's patients experienced certainly made it seem like his methods were doing something, but the commission wanted to figure out if it was caused by magnetic fluid or something else entirely. The commission came up with one clear way to test this: strip out all the suggestive elements of Mesmer's practice, the group setting, glass harmonica, and see if animal mag caused a crisis on its own. Mesmer refused to participate, so the commission worked with his lead disciple, Mesmer's Charles Deslan, instead. Here he is attempting to magnetize Benjamin Franklin during the proceedings.
Also, once again, Mesmer not wanting to participate. I just think it's annoying at this point. This guy clearly has something to hide.
When Deslan magnetized a subject while hidden behind a partition, nothing happened at all.
Then she emerges, there's exactly the same moves in front of her. She collapses.
Another test involved a woman drinking water she was told was magnetized, but wasn't.
She collapsed quite quickly within, I think, minutes in a full-fledged crisis. And then the commissioners bring her water to recover.
They told her that this was regular water.
She feels much better after drinking that. However, that cup was in fact magnetized.
Their innovative approach became the first prominent placebo-controlled blind trial. Unsurprisingly, the commission concluded that the subjects only reacted to animal magnetism when they expected it. And the true force behind Mesmer's methods was what they labeled imagination. But as it turns out, that conclusion ended up being an innovation itself.
Although the report shattered the notion that it was magnetic fluid that was doing the work, they did acknowledge that something's going on, right? Even if the reason is imagination.
Once the report was made public, Mesmer's reputation was ruined. Animal magnetism became a joke, and Mesmer was once again labeled a fraud and a charlatan. He left Paris in disgrace and died in 1815. But mesmerism lived on, finding a new fan base in the United States through the mid-1800s.
And then also, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of people, like, even though, like you say, like they said in this video, animal magnetism was kind of publicly declared to be a fake or non-existent, but people still, like to this day, use it as like evidence for their beliefs.
Until it evolved into something more recognizable today, hypnotism. James Braid, the surgeon who coined the term hypnotism in the 1840s, was fascinated by animal magnetism and wrote extensively about its potential. Like the Franklin Commission, Braid concluded that outside influence wasn't necessary to produce the phenomena of mesmerism. It could come from the mind alone. No magnets necessary. Mesmer's downfall at the hands of the Franklin Commission's report inadvertently ended up being foundational for our understanding of the placebo effect.
There are a couple of different ways you could read it. So one would be the rational scientific approach, or like the scientific method, has triumphed. Animal magnetism is completely destroyed as a sham, and that's the end of the story. Another way of reading it would be how powerful psychological suggestion can be.
Boom, there. And that, y'all, is one of the most exciting things to me, is to consider the possibilities of the placebo effect, to consider the possibilities of hypnotism, like self-hypnotism, right? We are incredible beings, right? We're incredible creatures, humans. Like we have really, really cool brains, right? We can do really amazing things. We have a capacity to imagine, right? Our internal worlds can be vast. They are literally unlimited and endless. I really do believe that the closest way that we can, I guess, come in contact with the concept of infinity is the limitless of our imagination, right? Everything that we see that's been made, right? The lights, my crystal display case, all this stuff, right? These all came from the human mind, from ideas. I can rant about this for a really long time because it really is exciting to me, how like human potential. I was thinking the other day about how a lot of people say things, or I've heard it said that humans don't use enough of their brains, right? They only use like 10% of their brains or whatever. I've also heard that is apparently like not true, which is unfortunate. But like we do use like all of our brains. But what I think is maybe what people are trying to get at, I think, is that there are ways that we're not really tapping fully into our human potential. And I think that when we do allow ourselves to really like get excited about our imagination, that is where like some of the magic happens. But that's my theory that I'm working with presently right now. And it's been exciting and interesting for me. So, you know, maybe it will be for some of you as well. Alrighty. Basically, what we're dealing with in this video, another thing that I want to mention is that there are a lot of ways that we can be pulled into similar scams nowadays. There are a lot of alternate techniques, healing modalities, things like I mentioned, like Reiki and EFT tapping, and I'm sure like a bunch of other things. Whatever, I'm not going to list any more than that. But those things, it's important to like do research, right? To try and see if there is any evidence-based research to see if the methods that you're using are helpful. I'm not saying that evidence-based research is the only thing that's useful at all. I think that, for example, like I can try methods, right, for myself and my own healing or my own mental health that are not evidence-based. And if I realize that they work for me, then that's great. The evidence is my own personal experience, right? But there definitely is some validity in using evidence-based techniques. One practical example that I'll use since I'm on the topic is that like a really strongly evidence-based technique is CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. But in my opinion, I don't really like it. I don't think it's really that effective. There's a lot of research about it, but it's just kind of like your really basic talk therapy, like thought shifting, thought manipulation type stuff. It's great. It's fine, really, but like it can be better, right? And a lot of people are like, this is kind of an example of an evidence-based practice that like really isn't all that great. And there are a lot of other ones that may have less evidence or less research about them, such as EMDR or something like that, but are much more effective. All right. The other thing that I want to mention is that this is where the idea of like hypnotism comes from, right? I'm certain that there were other types of things like this and seances and stuff before this, but the way that they were popularized, and I'm sure that there is a way that, you know, these ideas moved into the West. We love that shit, you know, as Americans. Maybe not all of us, but I don't know. I think a lot of us like spooky things. I like spooky things, right? I would love to go see like hypnotists or whatever, because I think that stuff is really interesting and fun. But yeah, if we go to hypnotists and then we're like, wow, that person has magical powers and they're like a god or something, then we've kind of moved in the wrong direction there. We just have to understand that pretty much all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. Like if we're suggestible, we can really convince ourselves about a lot of different things. All right, so that's where the term mesmerized comes from, right? We have the ability to be really taken advantage of when we're in suggestible states. And there are a lot of ways to be induced into suggestible states, maybe that you might not even realize. And honestly, I'm not even gonna lie, I'm gonna write that down as an idea for later, because I didn't understand what like suggestible states were and how often I was put into them growing up in church. Yeah. and it's really important to understand what it actually means, like what mind control is. It's not like, you know, you are getting very sleepy and like someone's like intentionally doing something to you. It can be more like someone throws a whole bunch of information at you in such a way that you are kind of like you're dazed, right? And if that puts you in a more suggestible state. I just jot this down so I don't forget, because you know, my Ferrari brain can't hold on to anything for more than 3 seconds. So, okay, cool. So moving forward, we're going to move on to a different topic now. This is pretty interesting stuff that I'm going to talk about right now. So, this one, I'm not going to show you a video, but I am going to just talk a little bit about this other idea. So when individuals don't trust the science of archaeologists and trained historians, we end up being susceptible to conspiracy theories like aliens building the pyramids, and ancient aliens and Atlantis and other alternate history type things. And so what I did some research and I found a TED Talk by this woman named Sarah Koenig. The TED Talk is called Aliens and Archaeology. So if you want to check that out, it's just called Aliens and Archaeology. Why do we get history wrong on purpose? So in this video, she describes her like frequent contact with the concept of pseudo-archaeology. So basically, it looks a lot like archaeology, but it really isn't. So that they're making a lot of wild, unproven claims about our past on this planet. And I'm sure it would be really frustrating for her to have this experience over and over again. So she starts the video telling this story about how she oftentimes will like be on a plane and she'll tell people like, hey, I'm an archaeologist. And they'll say, wow, that's so cool. You know, I just think that it's really awesome that, you know, the ancient alien astronauts, you know, came from the planet Nibiru to establish the culture in to establish the Sumerian culture in Mesopotamia. Like, I'd be pretty frustrated to hear that if I was an archaeologist. And I think that like this stuff might sound like I'm just making things up, but no, this is a real concept. I guess that's something that I can show y'all while I'm doing this, because I like to have visuals. Nibiru. I have, I am bad at spelling, so that's why this took me for forever. So I'm just going to show you a picture of what apparently people think this thing looks like. So yeah, like there are a bunch of, you can see like there's a bunch of videos. I'm sure if you look over here, you can see about people talking about Nibiru. If I look up here, this channel called Spirit. No, not that one. You look up this channel called Spirit Science, you'll see, look, the Nibiru movie, right? Anunnaki, all this stuff. If you're not familiar with any of these things, you can look into it for fun. It really is really quite interesting, not gonna lie. I I really hate to admit this stuff because I think it's pretty embarrassing. But like when I was like super like disconnected from reality, I thought that this stuff was so cool. I thought that this was like not just like a suggestion, but like probably a reality, like definitely probably a reality that there were ancient aliens from this other country who came down to Earth. And the stories are pretty interesting, y'all. The stories are pretty much like these aliens. They needed a lot of gold, I think, to protect their atmosphere. So they looked around the galaxies and they found Earth. And so they came to Earth and they created like human beings as like these creatures. And what else did they do? They basically kind of, I think they took monkeys or whatever, the highest developed species on the planet, and they injected alien DNA into them, and that's why we're so advanced. That's why we're different from monkeys, is because we have like alien DNA in our system. These things are quite, like I said, these things are fascinating. These are really fascinating ideas, but they're likely inaccurate. So we don't want to believe things that aren't true. So let me share a couple other false beliefs. I mentioned some before, but I'll go into detail with some of them. So they believe things that aliens built the pyramids, that there was no way that the ancient Egyptians could have built the pyramids. They believe that the hieroglyphics was really advanced. Humans could not have come up with that on their own. So those were actually created by the advanced species that survived the fall of Atlantis. So obviously there was a bunch of implications there. I think one of them is that like the human race is like far older than we actually think that it is, and that Atlantis was a real place, which science has proven that it's not. All right. Other things that I want to mention is that these concepts aren't just entertaining. And like fun and games to believe these things. I think that personally, these can be like super problematic. So a lot of these kind of alternate history, ancient aliens type stuff, those beliefs have pretty like racist and xenophobic implications. And and Sarah Koenig in her video, she gives a couple of other examples, which I'm going to review here. So a practical example is that people believe that ancient African Egyptians or Mayans weren't intelligent enough to create the elaborate structures we see today. But what we don't hear is that the Europeans who built the Colosseum in Rome or the Parthenon in Greece, they apparently didn't need any additional help from aliens to develop their, massive structures. So this is pretty interesting information. I don't know. It's kind of frustrating. And even this isn't really just impactful to other people. So it's not like, like one race of people is going to use this as information against another. No, it's like sometimes people, like their own cultures, they have misinformation about their own society, their own people. For example, well, another example, this woman, she was on a trip, I forget exactly where, but he had carved a really like magnificent sculpture that was the same as another one that was on one of the incredible buildings that they were doing research on. And he was like, yeah, I'm so impressed with this, and after I'm finished with it, I want to give it to the guy Eric Vonnegut, who was the guy who kind of presented the idea of ancient aliens. He didn't even have reverence for his own culture because there was misinformation about where the structures had come from. Yeah, I just think that's a shame. That really is a shame. It's not, this isn't harmless stuff, y'all. We need to make sure that we're getting accurate information so that we're not spreading lies like this. If you are curious about any of these things and you want to know more, I would really suggest that you watch a YouTube video. It's called Ancient Aliens Debunked. It's pretty good. Once again, this one, I think I'm halfway through the video. It's really long. It's like 3 hours. I'm like halfway through it, but it's pretty good. It gives like a lot of the practical information that they completely like leave out in the show Ancient Aliens. And that show is fun. It's like, it's entertaining and stupid. Once again. So like, like I said, it is, I agree. I think this is entertaining, but it's also harmful. We need to be able to spread accurate information. Another important note that I wanted to make is that according to the Smithsonian, Nazi beliefs were actually influenced by Atlantis, the whole concept of Atlantis, and may have even played a part in the Holocaust. They believed that the Nordic or Aryan race was created in Atlantis for the purpose of ruling the earth. And so they had German like pseudo historians and archaeologists. They really became obsessed with the idea of proving the superiority of the ancient Atlantean Aryan race. And this also can go to show that like believing in these theories may not really just be fun and games. There might be other implications that we're not recognizing. All right, so another topic that I want to mention, another area where we see a lot of, what shall we say, like BS, I guess, around this stuff. So, and that topic is quantum mysticism. And so if you look up quantum mysticism, you'll see that it basically is when people will pretty much appropriate quantum physics and say that it means a whole bunch of stuff that it really doesn't, and they kind of talk out of their ass. It's kind of ridiculous, but here we are. Okay, so one of the things that I think is important to mention here is that oftentimes spiritual and religious people will talk shit about science. They'll say things like, scientists are, dogmatic, or they're this and that, while at the same time, they will like use science as support their beliefs. They're like, our beliefs have scientific evidence, and that means that they're more trustworthy, but at the same time, they'll be like, science is stupid. So like, why are you trying to get scientific proof if at the same time you're going to like disregard science and like talk shit about it? That's one thing that I kind of have problems with. A lot of people will do that. You'll also see that online. A lot of like fake health gurus will they'll like say, oh, this research study that says that, flour is deadly for you, and like sunflower seeds are poisonous. Because this stuff is real. People really do these things. I think the last one I saw was like about how oatmeal is like terrible for you. But these things are just ridiculous. It's like that word healthism, where people are just trying to like, really restrict people's diets. Like, this is just, at this point, it's ridiculous. Anyway, spiritual people appropriate science for clout. I don't think it's cool. I think it's pretty messed up. If you're not gonna like science, fine, don't like science. But just like leave it there. Don't try to like, you know, say science, like don't try to pretend that scientific evidence is useful for you if you're going to disregard it nonetheless. Okay, so I have learned a lot about quantum physics, right? But not enough for me to be anything near understanding the math that actually goes into these ideas. People who just talk about quantum whatever and they're not explaining math to you, right? They probably they don't know what they're talking about. If I ever do that, if I ever tried to talk about like quantum whatever, I don't really know what I'm talking about. What I'm going to share with you right now is just pretty much explaining to you why people don't understand what they're talking about, why I didn't understand why I was talking about, and hopefully, I could just leave it there. I do want to do more research so that I understand this topic a little bit better, and I want to do a video just on this topic alone, just on quantum mysticism, because I think it's so interesting. But what we want to do is understand what we're dealing with here. So we have here a basic, with all this quantum stuff, people will say things like, because of quantum physics, everything is connected. Our thoughts create reality. Our thoughts create matter that can be unleashed into the universe. And then that has a certain vibration that will attract other materials to you. And the way that they prove all of these things is with with a false understanding of what's called the double slit experiment, something called the observer effect, right? So the basic understanding of the observer effect is that when you look at something or when you observe something, it changes fundamentally. So this is like kind of true, like a little bit true, but like not 100%. So let me explain here. We're gonna look into this a little bit. Okay. So, and once again, I have a very, very like elementary understanding of these things, but even with that understanding, I at least am willing to admit the truth. Okay, so what this research study did was they shot a bunch of things at the wall here, and at one point they had detectors on, and they were, when they, I guess, observed, right, when they observed the materials, they looked like these two lines, but when they didn't observe it, it looked like this. So basically what they said is, when you're looking at something, it is one way, but when you don't look at it, it's another way. Wow, that's amazing. What people have done is basically they turned the word observe, which actually means in a scientific way to measure these things, and they changed it into like what it means to look at something. And this is really confusing for people because, you think that like, we want to, sorry, okay, let me start that over. We think that the word observation clearly means looking at something, but it's really easy to misunderstand these ideas if you don't know like scientific jargon. For example, that's why I had like no clue what these ideas were trying to get across. So really quick, I do want to look up this other video. I forgot to attach it to this to my notes, so I didn't get to. Let me see if I put it down here. No, I didn't. So but I do want to look it up really quick and see if I can find it. Okay, because I think that it's a good video. that explains exactly what I'm talking about. Ah, okay. So it explains exactly what I'm talking about here, and it'll help you all understand why people get this wrong. So I want to explain this all here. That's not what I want to do. Okay.
And here we are, the granddaddy of all quantum weirdness, the infamous double-slit experiment. To understand this experiment, we first need to see how particles, or little balls of matter, act. We randomly shoot a small object, say a marble, at the screen. We see a pattern on the back wall where they went through the slit and hit. Now, if we add a second slit, we would expect to see a second band duplicated to the right. Now, let's look at waves. The waves hit the slit and radiate out, striking the back wall with the most intensity directly in line with the slit. The line of brightness on the back screen shows that intensity. This is similar to the line the marbles make. But when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave, the other wave, they cancel each other out. Oh, there is an interference pattern on the back wall. Places where the two tops meet are the highest intensity, the bright lines, and so there is nothing. So when we throw things, that is matter, through two slits, we get this, two bands of hits. And with waves, we get an interference pattern of many bands. Good so far. Now, let's go quantum. An electron is a tiny, tiny bit of matter, like a tiny marble. Let's fire a stream through one slit. It behaves just like the marble, a single band. So, if we shoot these tiny bits through two slits, we should get, like the marbles, two bands.
Ah. Oh no. Hold on, my friends. Hold on, my friends. We had an issue. Okay.
An interference pattern. We fired electrons. Tiny matter through. We get a pattern like waves, not like little marbles. How? How could pieces of matter create an interference pattern like a wave? It doesn't make sense. But physicists are clever. They thought maybe those little balls are bouncing off each other and creating that pattern. So they decide to shoot electrons through one at a time. There is no way they can interfere with each other. But after an hour of this, the same interference pattern is seen to emerge. The conclusion is inescapable. The single electron leaves as a particle, becomes a wave of potentials, goes through both slits, and interferes with itself to hit the wall like a particle. But mathematically, it's even stranger. It goes through both slits, and it goes through neither. And it goes through just one, and it goes through just the other. All of these possibilities are in superposition with each other. But physicists were completely baffled by this. So they decided to peek and see which slit it actually goes through. They put a measuring device by one slit to see which one it went through and let it fly. But the quantum world is far more mysterious than they could have imagined. When they observed, the electron went back to behaving like a little marble. It produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or observing which slit it went through meant it only went through one, not both. The electron decided to act differently, as though it was aware it was being watched. And it was here that physicists stepped forever into the strange netherworld of quantum events. What is matter? Marbles or waves? And waves of what? And what does an observer have to do with any of this?
Okay. So this, I am almost positive that this clip is from a movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? I think it's all about quantum physics or whatever. So you can see here in the title of this video, it's The Observer Effect of Quantum Physics Says Your Thoughts Affect Reality. And so the implications that they're trying to say is that, like, you know, the observation here, this is super misleading that they used an eyeball, in my opinion. So wait, you see, I think they said over.
Which slit it went through meant it only it produced a pattern of two bands, not an interference pattern of many. The very act of measuring or
Okay, the very act of measuring or observing, right? So basically the idea of this is that when we observe something or pay attention to something, we can actually affect it. And if we can do this on like a vibrational level, if we can put our thoughts out, right, we can interact with matter with our thoughts, we can attract things to us. That's what this is trying to get across. And if I'm not mistaken, there are a lot of people who kind of was saying like, kind of agreeing with this person. I think like this one who says it's easy to understand, but there are some people who are understanding like the issue of observation is that this is an active process, not a passive one. And so when you try to measure an electron, you end up interacting with it, therefore changing the experiment. So this is why this is so misleading. It's not just that you're observing something. A better way of explaining this would be if they like showed an eyeball that like shot pellets out at something and then forced it to act differently. That's why it acts differently. So whenever you hear anybody using the observer effect as some type of evidence for why thoughts create reality, just know that it's not accurate, which is unfortunate. I wish that it was true, but it's not. Bummer. Okay. So next here, we're gonna, the other thing that frustrates me, and I mentioned this earlier, is that people don't just, criticize science and are, scientifically illiterate. They also try to demonize science, and they try to make unfounded claims about what science is. They'll say things like, oh, science is an alternate religion, or science is dogmatic. They'll oftentimes like make claims about science like not being possible without some type of higher power or higher creator or something like that, which is also like untrue. And let's take a peek at this cool Christian meme that I found, right? Okay, here we go. So it starts off saying, look, God and okay, let's back this up. God and science, there's no way that these things go together. And then look at this guy. In science, I trust. Like instead of in God, we trust. You see how they're trying to make him seem like some type of religious fanatic. Anyway, so but then he's like quite the opposite. God makes science possible. Science would not be possible in an evolving universe. The laws of the universe would evolve and test results would keep changing. However, God keeps the universe operating by the consistent laws he created and upholds. Therefore, science is possible. Wow. Thanks, Jesus. No, I'm joking. Okay, so this basically also is a really good way of displaying the fact that whoever is in Answers in Genesis really has no idea what they're talking about, because the very act of science, the very point of science is to create a system by which you can ask questions, right? You can ask questions over and over again. You're curious about the things that are happening in your universe, and you're not rigid about the findings, so that if you find new evidence, you're willing to say, okay, my previous idea was wrong. If we didn't do that, then we would still all be believing that the earth was flat, and not just having some people believing that the earth was flat, right? Because we found new evidence and we realized, oh, hey, we were wrong. Maybe we should do something different because, the evidence does not support the belief that the earth is flat, right? This is what we should be doing, asking good questions, not saying that like, okay, God created these rules and that's how it is. That's how it's always going to be. That is like not scientific at all. But you see, I didn't understand that when I was first doing this stuff. All right. So I'm glad we got here. All I wanted to share is that one thing that's really important for me to share or talk about is what science is. Okay. So here we clearly see science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. It is a set of techniques, methods, and laws that are used or were used to achieve knowledge. And then you see, although the science is a set of propositions and ordered and logic. Okay. Although the science is a set of propositions ordered and logically related to form a coherent system, these propositions must be accurate and not just ideas without foundation. Like, y'all, why don't we just listen to this? Like, this sounds great. Like, why don't we want things to be based on accurate information, right? But apparently that's too much to ask for. So another thing, so what is this process, right? What is this method that is being used? And what we learn from is the scientific method. Okay, here we are. So we start with an observation. Oh, hey, this apple fell on my head, right? We've seen that picture about gravity, right? Or, when I leave my eggs out, it starts to rot after a couple of days. So we're like, okay, so we're like, my eggs will rot after 3 days. That's that's what you're researching. And maybe you make this hypothesis, eggs will rot after 3 days, right? And then you test the experiment and you analyze the data, and you'll find out that, okay, maybe it takes a little bit longer than 3 days for eggs to rot. And then there's your conclusions. And then you're going to put that system out for other people to research with you. And that's awesome. Everybody gets to gather together. They get to observe all of this information together, like we mentioned before, but they get to do their own measurements, right? They get to study these things actually. It's not just about doing something one time and then saying that it's real. Man, there's so much more I could say, y'all, but I don't want to run out of time. And I'm getting tired, as usual. All right, so why is scientific literacy important? So for me, I think there's a couple of reasons. When we appreciate scientific literacy and we work towards scientific literacy, we have an actual understanding of the world that we live in. We have a better understanding of ourselves as human animals. We don't just see ourselves as these etheric beings that we can just mistreat our bodies to upgrade ourselves spiritually. No, we're actually treating our bodies with care and gentleness. We also allow ourselves to strive for the well-being of all human beings. For example, with trans-related topics, I came in contact with a person on the internet the other day who talked about, who is a skeptic as well. And, he talks a lot about trusting the science, but at the same time was yes, transgender people are delusional, while, scientific evidence has kind of already made it really clear that the evidence for trans people's existence, for there to actually be real evidence for trans people being trans, transgender is real. So yeah, we have to just follow the science. We can't just start talking out of our asses. When we follow the science, it tends to be helpful, right? When we follow the science about research studies about things like microaggressions and racism, we actually can see that there are problems going on. When we see the evidence about things like CSA going on in families, we can do something to stop these things. When we don't listen to the evidence, we don't do anything. Well, also, sometimes we do have the evidence and we still don't do anything. For example, people who are still getting, people who still don't care that there is evidence that trans people are actually legitimate. They just don't care that the evidence is there. They just do what they want. So people will just believe what they want to believe at the end of the day. But if you are willing to do the work, to learn more about how everything works, and then you will kind of learn to trust. You'll learn to trust the science. You'll learn to trust the system, right? I'm not saying that if someone just says that they're using science, you should believe them, but you should, if you hear a claim, great. do your own research, look at other people's studies, check to see if there are people who have done the study and gotten really different results. Like do your due diligence with these things. And when we start to become more critical, we can see the world a lot more clearly. And I think that there was one person who does this beautifully. His name is James Randi. He is this like he's this like super adorable old dude. I think he is super awesome. The work that he has done has specifically impacted my journey on my skeptic path or whatever. I have really not I really hadn't understood like how much people were being fooled and bamboozled by a lot of kind of like spiritual healers and stuff like that. If it wasn't for James Randi, yeah, this guy's really awesome. I'll just say that. So I want us to. We're gonna the last thing that we're gonna do here today. Before we wrap up is check out this video by James Randi. It's kind of long, but I think that it's really, really helpful to see. And okay, let's make that bigger. And let's check this out together.
Happy to see so many fine folks out here and so many smiling faces. I have a very peculiar background, attitude, and approach to the real world because I am a conjurer. Now, I prefer that term over magician because if I were a magician, that would mean that I use spells and incantations and weird gestures in order to accomplish real magic. No, I don't do that. I'm a conjurer who is someone who pretends to be a real magician. Now, how do we go about that sort of thing? We depend on the fact that audiences such as yourselves will make assumptions. For example, when I walked up here and I took the microphone from the stand and switched it on, you assume this was a microphone, which it is not. As a matter of fact, this is something that about half of you, more than half of you, will not be familiar with. It's a beard trimmer, you see, and makes a very. I've tried it many times. The other assumption that you made, and this little lesson is to show you that you will make assumptions, not only that you can, but that you will when they are properly suggested to you. You believe I'm looking at you. Wrong. I'm not looking at you. I can't see you. I know you're out there. They told me backstage that it's a full house and such. I know you're there because I can hear you, but I can't see you because I normally wear glasses. These are not glasses. These are empty frames. Quite empty frames. Now, why would a grown man appear before you wearing empty frames on his face? To fool you, ladies and gentlemen, to deceive you, to show that you, too, can make assumptions. Don't you ever forget that. Now, I have to do something, first of all, switch to real glasses so I can actually see you, which would probably be a convenience. I don't know. I haven't had a good look. Well, it's not that great a convenience.
Okay, so this guy, he's a real jokester for sure, as you can quite clearly tell. And but I really think that this is an important way that he opens up these videos. And I've watched a ton of stuff that he's a ton of talks that he's given, and he does this trick often where he'll do the thing with the glasses, or he'll come up with something and pretend it's a microphone. Because like we all make assumptions, y'all. It is so easy to convince other people. We do this thing where we assume that people are going to be relatively honest, right? We don't assume that people are just going to like blatantly do things like lie to us like that. But sometimes, people do lie that blatantly. And obviously, like, and he did that in this video, obviously for the joke of it. But it's a really good example that like we are very, very easily fooled, y'all. If you ever think like, oh man, I could never get pulled into a cult. I could never fall for, a scam artist. I could never I just really think that anyone could be susceptible to this stuff if they don't know how to think critically. So that's why it's so important for people to really learn how to do these things. And if you watch, I believe it's the last video in my series on religious trauma, I went through kind of my process of how I challenge my own beliefs. It's a really important process, so I would really recommend checking that out if you haven't already. All right.
I have to do something now which seems a little bit strange for a magician, but I'm going to take some medication. This is a full bottle of Calms Forte. I'll explain that in just a moment. Ignore the instructions. That's what the government has put in there to confuse you, I'm sure. I will take enough of these. Indeed, the whole container. 32 capsules of Calms Forte. Now that I've done that, I'll explain in a moment. I must tell you that I am an actor. I'm an actor who plays a specific part. I play the part of a magician, a wizard, if you will, a real wizard. If someone were to appear on this stage in front of you and actually claim to be an ancient prince of Denmark named Hamlet, you would be insulted, and rightly so. Why would a man assume that you would believe something bizarre like this? But there exists out there a very large population of people who will tell you that they have psychic, magical powers, that they can predict the future, that they can make contact with the deceased. Oh, they also say they will sell you astrology or other fortune-telling methods. Oh, they gladly sell you that, yes. And they also say that they can give you perpetual motion machines and free energy systems. They claim to be psychics or sensitives, whatever they claim. But the one thing that has made a big comeback just recently is this business of speaking with the dead. Now, to my innocent mind, dead implies incapable of communicating. You might agree with me on that. But these people, they tend to tell you that not only can they communicate either, but they can hear the dead as well, and they can relay this information back to the living. I wonder if that's true. I don't think so, because this subculture of people use exactly the same gimmicks that we magicians do, exactly the same physical methods, the same psychological methods. And they effectively and profoundly deceive millions of people around the earth to their detriment. They deceive these people, cost them a lot of money, cost them a lot of emotional anguish.
So that's another thing that I think is really, really important to mention. A lot of techniques that are used with spirituality, religion, and things like that to induce like altered states of consciousness and things can also be used by people who are completely secular. You can have very, very similar results. You don't need God at all to induce any of these states, right? You can have ridiculously like spiritual, blissful experiences with no deities connected to you at all, right? That's important to mention moving forward.
Billions of dollars are spent every year all over the globe on these charlatans. Now, I have two questions I would like to ask these people if I had the opportunity to do so. First question, I want to ask them to call up, because they do hear them through the ear. They listen to the spirits like this. I'm going to ask you to call up the ghost of my grandmother, because when she died, she had the family will, and she secreted it someplace. We don't know where it is. So we asked Granny, where is the will, Granny? What does Granny say? She says, I'm in heaven, and it's wonderful. I'm here with all my old friends, my deceased friends and my family, and all the puppy dogs and the kittens that I used to have when I was a little girl. And I love you, and I'll always be with you. Goodbye. And she didn't answer the damn question. Where is the will? Now, she could easily have said, oh, it's in the library on the second shelf behind the encyclopedia, but she doesn't say that. No, she doesn't. She gave useful information to us. We paid a lot of money for that information, but we didn't get it. The second question that I'd like to ask, rather simple. Suppose I ask them to contact the spirit of my deceased brother-in-law, as an example. Why do they insist on saying, remember they speak into his ear, why do they say, my name starts with J or M? Is this a hunting game, a hunting and fishing? What is it? Is it 20 questions? No, it's more like 120 questions, but it is a cruel, vicious, absolutely conscienceless, I'll be all right, keep your seats, game that these people play, and they take advantage of the innocent, the naive, the grieving, the needy people out there.
So, this is really what happens, y'all. People, many psychics and mediums will give messages to grieving loved ones. And those grieving loved ones, they're really just happy to hear anything, some type of connection to their deceased loved one. But the thing is like getting like real actionable information is pretty rare. And you know, they do ask a lot of questions in these sessions. Any type of mediumship question, you know, if you've lost a person, and they ask things like, you know, oh, did their name start with an M or a J, or I'm getting an R name, I'm getting R, Randy, Rachel. Like they'll say things like that, and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's actually Ralph. Ralph is the name. And then at the end, the people are like, wow, I just had this amazing reading by this person, and which is cool. Like I think that that's cool. It is nice to have those kinds of experiences, but like at the same time, we have to understand that like oftentimes these people are, perhaps there could be a chance that they are just kind of going into their subconscious unlimited wildly amazing and incredible imagination, right? And they're pulling from that imagination. They might also be people who are really, really sensitive. And I've also heard tons of people share the idea that of this theory of neurodivergent people, like autistic people, being really skilled at picking up things like this. If you, I also like, there's so many ideas that I have, but like, when you hear about a lot of really spiritual, intuitive people, when you hear about the way that they are, the way that they behave, they can be things like they can want to spend time alone. They can be particularly rigid, really like intensely passionate about their ideas, which are some traits that can be associated with people who like have some autistic symptoms or are neurodivergent, things like that. Pattern recognition, right? We some of us have a really strong way of attuning to other people's bodies and subtle ways that they move or carry themselves, or micro facial expressions you can pick up on and recognize, like where even what you're saying, how it's landing on the person, and if you're saying the right types of things, right? Once again, humans are amazing. And when we discredit our amazing ability, pretend that it's due to like a magical force that's outside of us. We are magical, right? Magic, but it's just we're magical on the inside.
Now, this is a process that is called cold reading. There's one fellow out there, Van Prague is his name, James Van Prague. He's one of the big practitioners of this sort of thing. John Edward, Sylvia Brown, and Rosemary Alcia, they are other operators. There are hundreds of them all over the earth. But in this country, James Van Prague is very big. And what does he do? He likes to tell you how the deceased got deceased, the people he's talking to through his ear, you see. So what he says is very often, it's like this. He says, he tells me before he passed that he had trouble breathing. Folks, that's what dying is all about. You stop breathing and then you're dead. It's that simple. And that's the kind of information they're going to bring back to you? I don't think so. Now, these people will make guesses. They'll say things like, why am I getting electricity? He's saying to me, electricity. Was he an electrician? No. Did he ever have an electric razor? No. It was a game of hunting at questions like this. This is what they go through. Now, folks often ask us at the James Randi Educational Foundation, they call me and they say, why are you so concerned about this, Mr. Randi? Isn't that just a lot of fun? No, it is not fun. It is a cruel farce. Now, it may bring a certain amount of comfort, but that comfort lasts only about 20 minutes or so, and then the people look in the mirror and they say, I just paid a lot of money for that reading, and what did she say to me? I love you. They always say that. They don't get any information. They don't get any value for what they spend. Now, Sylvia Brown is the big operator. We call her the Talons. Sylvia Brown, thank you. Sylvia Brown is the big operator in this field at this very moment. Now, Sylvia Brown, just to show you, she actually gets $700 for a 20-minute reading over the telephone. She doesn't even go there in person. And you have to wait up to 2 years because she's booked ahead that amount of time. You pay.
Just want to quickly mention, like, this is super common now, just like really exploiting people for tons of money for things. You can see a lot of like online spiritual gurus. They'll sell you the packages for $3,333 because when it's all the same numbers, like angel numbers, it's super amazing. And like a bunch of people, sometimes they're not even like spiritual. Sometimes they're just like, per productivity gurus or whatever, but they do the same. It's the same type of fraud, same type of false claims that they make.
By credit card or whatever, and then she will call you sometime in the next 2 years. You can tell it's her. Hello, this is Sylvia Brown. That's her. You can tell right away. Now, Montel Williams is an intelligent man. We all know who he is on television. He's well-educated. He's smart. He knows what Sylvia Brown is doing, but he doesn't give a damn. He just doesn't care. Because the bottom line is the sponsors love it, and he will expose her to television publicity all the time. Now, what does Sylvia Brown give you for that $700? She gives you the names of your guardian angels. That's first. Now, without that, how could we possibly function? She gives you the names of previous lives, who you were in previous lives. It turns out that the women that she gives readings for were all Babylonian princesses or something like that. And the men were all Grecian warriors fighting with Agamemnon. Nothing is ever said about a 14-year-old bootblack in the streets of London who died of consumption. He isn't worth bringing back, obviously. And the strange thing, folks, you may have noticed this too. You see these folks on television. They never call anybody back from hell. Everyone comes back from heaven, but never from hell if they call back.
So I think this is also a funny point. Just basically the whole like past lives thing.
Any of my friends,
the whole past lives thing is that whenever someone has a past life, this isn't true, not every single time, but a lot of times people will talk about like they're, Cleopatra or whoever, and there's like a bazillion people whose past life was like the goddess. Sorry, a bazillion people whose past life was like the goddess Isis. That's like crazy, y'all. Like, how can every single person be the same person in a past life? Like, some of these things end up kind of like falling apart after a while.
The story. Now, Sylvia Browne is an exception. An exception in one way, because the James Randi Educational Foundation, my foundation, offers a $1 million prize in negotiable bonds, very simply, won by all you have to do is prove any paranormal, occult, or supernatural event or power of any kind under proper observing conditions. It's very easy. Win the $1 million. Sylvia Browne is an exception in that she's the only professional psychic in the whole world that has accepted our challenge. She did this on the Larry King Live show on CNN 6.5 years ago, and we haven't heard from her since. Strange. She said, first of all, that she didn't know how to contact me. Duh. A professional psychic who speaks to dead people, she can't reach me. I'm alive, you may have noticed. Well,
I love this guy. He really is a hoot. Also, really quick, I'm going to let this play, and I'm going to grab my laptop charger. So that's why I'm running away.
Pretty well, anyway. She couldn't reach me. Now she says she doesn't want to reach me because I'm a godless person. All the more reason to take the $1 million, wouldn't you think, Sylvia? Now, these people need to be stopped. Seriously now. They need to be stopped because this is a cruel farce. We get people coming to the foundation all the time. They're ruined financially and emotionally because they've given their money and their faith to these people. Now, I popped some pills earlier. I have to explain that to you. Homeopathy. Let's find out what that's all about. You've heard of it. It's an alternative form of healing, right? Homeopathy actually consists, and that's what this is. This is Calms Forte, 32 caplets of sleeping pills. I forgot to tell you that. I just ingested 6.5 days worth of sleeping pills. 6.5 days. That certainly is a fatal dose. It says right on the back here, in case of overdose, contact your poison control center immediately, and it gives an 800 number. Keep your seats. It's going to be okay. I don't really need it because I've been doing this stunt for audiences all over the world for the last 8 or 10 years, taking fatal doses of homeopathic sleeping pills. Why don't they affect me? The answer may surprise you. What is homeopathy? It's taking a medicine that really works and diluting it down, well beyond Avogadro's limit, diluting it down to the point where there's none of it left. Now, folks, this is not just a metaphor I'm going to give you now. It's true. It's exactly equivalent to taking one 325 milligram aspirin tablet, throwing it into the middle of Lake Tahoe, and then stirring it up, obviously with a very big stick, and waiting 2 years or so until the solution is homogeneous. Then when you get a headache, you take a sip of this water, and voila, it is gone.
Like, see, these things are like really interesting. Like, people will swear by this stuff. And if you look at, like, if you go and research homeopathy, it was really interesting. Like, it was kind of like the belief was that, like, for example, if you had a stomach ache, you would like take some type of a medicine that also caused a stomach ache, and that would like help you feel better. Which, like, I don't really, maybe that's, an idea, but like when you test it, like with the scientific method, it doesn't work better than placebo.
Now, that is true. That is what homeopathy is all about. And another claim that they make, you'll love this one. The more dilute the medicine is, they say, the more powerful it is. Well, wait a minute. We heard about a guy in Florida, the poor man. He was on homeopathic medicine. He died of an overdose. He forgot to take his pill. Work on it. Work on it. It's a ridiculous thing. It is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what we're doing believing in all this nonsense over all these years. Now, let me tell you, the James Randi Educational Foundation is waving this very big carrot. But I must say, the fact that nobody has taken us up on this offer doesn't mean that the powers don't exist. They might, someplace out there. Maybe these people are just independently wealthy. Well, with Sylvia Browne, I would think so. $700 for a 20-minute reading over the telephone, that's more than lawyers make. I mean, that's a fabulous amount of money. These people don't need the $1 million, perhaps, but wouldn't you think they'd like to take it just to make me look silly? Just to get rid of this godless person out there that's Sylvia Browne all the time? I think that something needs to be done about this. We really would love to have suggestions from you folks on how to contact federal, state, and local authorities to get them to do something.
Yeah.
If you find out, now, I understand, we've seen people even today speaking to us about AIDS epidemics and starving kids around the world and impure water supplies that people have to suffer with. Those are very important, critically important to us, and we must do something about those problems. But at the same time, as Arthur C. Clarke said, the rotting of the human mind, the business of believing in the paranormal and the occult and the supernatural, all of this total nonsense, this medicine, I think something should be done about that. It lies in education. Largely, it's the media, or to blame for this.
So one thing that I wanted to mention here is that, like, I disagree with Randy here in the idea that there really is something to the idea of the occult mysteries that we've been dealing with for such a long time. Um, I really think that spirituality does provide a really wonderful way for us to engage in important activities. And, I think that religion and mainstream spirituality are outdated, and a lot of it really isn't useful is not really useful for self-development anymore. But there are a lot of exceptions, but at the same time, I think that there are a lot of ways that um, religious and spiritual ideas are a little bit outdated, but it doesn't mean that there isn't value in, I guess, maybe the underlying messages in